Hello class and welcome to MSE 402, Engineering Project Management. This week for Module 5 what we've got is the Project Monitor and Control phase that we'll be covering. So let's go ahead and jump into a couple of our models, show you what that looks like. So within that PMBOK, the PMI Book of Knowledge or Body of Knowledge, you'll see that what we've done is we've got their model up here. You can see that their monitoring and control process group is the area of skills that we'll be talking about. And below me you'll see that in that monitoring and controlling process area there are still 10 knowledge areas encompassed in that model. But in the model we're using, you can see that what we've got is we've got our phase, monitoring and controlling. This is how it fits in with all the others. So we finished introduction first, then we went into initiating, then we did the planning phase, then we did the executing phase, and now we're into the monitoring and controlling phase. And you'll see that that monitoring and controlling phase covers areas that are all the way up to where we started in the initiating phase, all the way down almost to closing. So it takes us all the way through all of those. All of these are kind of interconnected, and once again, remember, changes are constantly happening, especially in the monitoring and controlling phase or area, because that's one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure if something is changing, we're aware of it, or if we're implementing a change, we understand where it's going and what's happening. And then once again, quality is one of those characteristics that's changing or moving up and down in any of these module areas. So the monitoring and controlling process group itself consists of those processes required to track, review, orchestrate, and measure the performance of the project along with identification of areas which may require changes on your project. Okay? So let's jump into our lecture portion of this, our presentation portion of this. So monitoring and controlling, for many groups, it's easier to kind of pull these apart and deal with them separately. And by that I mean the monitoring you do is possibly different than the controlling that you do. Now we umbrella them together in this particular lecture because they are considered, a joined process. It's an interconnected process, but the primary purpose is to verify the deliverables against the project plan and any of the requirements that you've had come in. The monitoring and controlling process itself oversees all of the tasks and metrics necessary to ensure that the approved and authorized project is within scope. So you're looking for things that are in scope, not out of scope, on time and on budget, so that the project proceeds with minimal risk. Okay? This process involves comparing actual performance, which is our baseline, measure the baseline against where we're actually at. And so we're trying to actually understand the difference between the two, and there may be significant differences. On most projects, you're going to find that schedule is one of the things that seems to erode pretty rapidly. So if you can keep a project on schedule, that's a very, very good thing. Project managers that can do that are probably moving a lot of different balls around. They're moving, with a lot of different activities and different things. That monitoring option, being able to see what's going on, is one of the only ways you'll be able to do that. Cost, on the other hand, can be increasing without a recognition of where it's coming from, because there may be things that are independent of what you get visibility to. Rates could change on people's, hourly rates on the people that you're working with can change. The company's wrap rate could change. I mean, there's things outside your ability to actually get the numbers until it's actually happened. So sometimes you don't have control of certain things. You have to accept that they're happening. You'll see that the process groups, those knowledge areas, in the PMBOK model underneath my image here, we have 4.4 within the PMI guide, monitor and control project work, and then perform integrated change control. Those are all married together along with all of these other areas. So you can see how much, I'll call it, interconnectedness or splintering happens within project monitoring and controlling. It typically starts with what we'll refer to as a pseudo baseline. So we've created a pseudo baseline for you to kind of get your project started. That was done early in the project, and then what we're going to be doing is you're periodically going to be looking at that and starting to pull what I'll call preliminary earned value against it. So let's jump in and just talk about monitoring and controlling. So project monitoring, what exactly is that? It tracks the operational work of the project by asking the question, is the work we are conducting on the project progressing as projected? It lets the project manager and the team know where the project performance is in terms of cost, time, risk, quality. All of those performance characteristics on the project are what you get a visibility to when you do project monitoring. Now, project control is different than that. Project control evaluates the systems and decision-making processes to manage the variances between the project plans. The project plans being your initial project, which you did some level of initial baseline, versus where you're at right now as you're tracking to it. And that is also in terms of scope, cost, schedule, and performance. Okay? And it provides you, or it should be giving you what we refer to as a realistic view of the project execution. If I'm overrunning and I can anticipate I'm going to continue to overrun, you should be able to see that. You should have visibility to that. If you are underrunning, you should have visibility to that. It gives you the ability to really understand where you're at a specific point in time. And that's why you monitor it progressively through the project, and you try to do control, I'll call it course corrections if necessary, as required. But you can't do that unless you actually can see what your progress is and how it impacts your project, either from a positive or a negative perspective. Those variances and the variance reports are what give you the ability to really understand what's going on. Current project performance is one of the best indicators of what we'll call future performance. That anticipation, if you look at the curve, where are we headed, unless there's something that happens that causes a drop-off. Typically, you can create you can extrapolate a line and say if it's hitting these 3 points, it's probably going to continue somewhere in that, and you can start to look for a trend. That trend data and the analysis used for trend data is what we refer to as earned value. Earned value, the method itself, sometimes referred to as EVMS. It's the earned value management system. And there's a lot of different characteristics to earned value that we're going to be talking about. It's the quantitative project management technique for evaluating project performance. It has been one of the best ways for us to really understand how a project is performing at a specific point in time and being able to anticipate by looking at past performance, where we are now, to predict where we're going to be in the future. So it's a combination of schedule and cost management systems. The Earned Value Management System, EVMS, okay, the first concept that I want you to really understand is what we call PV, planned value. I want you to really get a good, clear understanding of what planned value is. The planned value is, what did we estimate the value of the work to be planned to be spent as of today? What is it going to cost us to get across the finish line? Then you have earned value, EV, which is the value of the work that is completed as of today, PV of the completed work. So the planned value of the completed work at this point in time. And then you have actual cost, AC. And that's total. That's the total cost, actually incurred as of today. Where are we at this point in time? Not the end of the project, but at this point in time, where are we at? What have we spent to this point? And you can take a look at where we were supposed to be, and the measurement between those two gives you great information. You have something else called budget at complete. That's the total planned value of the project. That's BAC. And then you've got estimate at complete, EAC, and many times you're going to hear people say they have an EAC system in place. That's an estimate at complete. They're looking for the forecast of the total cost of the project as of today. If we take a look at the project today and we say, what is it going to cost me to get across the finish line? If I add everything up, what is that anticipated to be? And then you have something else that's referred to as the ETC. That's the estimate to complete. That's the estimated cost of the remaining work you have in front of you. What else is left to get you across the finish line? What would that number be? And then you have variances. You have a VAC, which is a variance at complete. the variance of total project cost as of today. So those are some of the key terms that you're going to see, and we're going to kind of pull at those a little bit more. In the PMBOK guide, plan value is the authorized budget of work to be accomplished for an activity within the work breakdown structure. So it is not meant, plan value is not meant to cover things that are out of scope or things that have not been brought into the baseline yet, things that you may not have approved. So the second concept we talked about, EV or earned value, refers to the fiscal value of the project work that has been completed. The value is earned on the basis of the work that has been completed on time and as quoted. And then that third concept that we really want to have you look at is what we refer to as AC, and that's your actual costs. So the express of the sums of the costs, of completing the work in a project are what these formulas will actually drive you to, so that you get a clear understanding of it. So in summary, remember, there were 3 points that I need you to really remember that we're going to want you to get a good, clear understanding for on your projects. Earned value, the planned value, and the actual cost. And remember, earned value was the cost of the work completed so far. Planned value was the planned cost to that specific date when you pull that PV number. And then the actual cost is what it has actually cost you to get to that point. Okay? Now, earned value data points are what we refer to as variances, can be both not only in the cost side, but they can be in the schedule side. So you have what we refer to as cost variance, and we have schedule variance. Cost variance is going to give you the variance or the difference between, what you planned versus what you've spent from a financial standpoint. Schedule variance is going to give you the same thing. It's going to be what you planned versus what you've spent, but from I'll call it from a time perspective. So you're looking at days or hours or, the months it takes for you to complete something. In a project, before you can start, you had to create some level of understanding of what your cost was going to be. So you had a budget that you started with, and you had a schedule that you started with. And that schedule was roughly how long did you think it was going to take. And progressively what you've done is you've decomposed that information into the scope statement, translated it into the WBS structure. From the WBS structure, you've then loaded that into Microsoft Project. And inside Microsoft Project, you're actually calculating and measuring this on a daily basis if you need to. Okay? Let me go ahead and jump into talking about positive cost variance. What does that mean? A positive cost variance is a good thing. If we can determine that the cost and schedule variances are positive, the project is considered both within budget and ahead of schedule. This is a wonderful position to be in. 99% of the project managers that are out there rarely are in this position. When you are, you typically don't get additional scrutiny, especially if you can monitor and measure and see that you're going to come across the finish line still in a positive position. However, if you're working on a negative variance, so the magnitude of positive variances is large, the project manager should investigate it. By that I mean if it seems unrealistic, if you're going to come across way on the positive side, there's something wrong. Okay? It typically just cannot happen. If you have measured the work correctly, if you have, ROM'd it out and done your homework in the WBS section, then you really have a good, clear understanding of what it should have cost you. So if there is something where the positive variance is extremely large, that means you may have missed something. There may be something from a requirement standpoint that isn't covered in your current project. You need to go back and look at that. You need to find out why. From a negative cost variance, you need to understand that if the schedule variance is negative, it stands to reason that the project is behind schedule. The same thing, okay, with cost. But if the magnitude of the negative variances are large, corrective action should be taken. And that is one of the reasons we monitor and measure our projects, is to identify these areas where if something negative is happening, we interject ourselves and the processes to see What is it that we could do to try to course correct that? What is causing that erosion of either cost or schedule that's driving us in a negative direction? And that's what I'll call the art of project management is being able to take this type of position and either turn it around or optimize it to where you minimize the negative impact to your customer and to you. Now, as I talked earlier about creating, I'll call it a project baseline. You were given an initial budget, and that initial budget, once you loaded it into your WBS and you've got your first, I'll call it Gantt chart view, is your initial baseline. That is, you can call it a draft baseline, you can call it a preliminary baseline, but that is a baseline. It is in essence where you laid out all of the costs, all the schedule, and said this is what we're going to start working to. Then what happens is you come back and you recheck that baseline. And the monitoring and measuring we do is based on where you were in the beginning from a baseline standpoint. And then the time phasing as you progress through a project causes you to look at things from a baseline's perspective. Where are we at this point in time as I'm monitoring and measuring compared to what my baseline said I should be at? Now, you can create a new baseline, but typically that means you have to have the customer's approval and many other, all of the stakeholders have to accept it also. And sometimes projects become so far entrenched into the negative that the data just doesn't make sense to continue looking at it. It may mean that you will be asked to come back and create a new baseline. We are going to re-baseline the project, and typically when that happens, new management is put in place, somebody new takes over the project, and they're given the opportunity to continue moving forward with it. So let's also talk about variance analysis. So everyone that you're going to be providing information to as a project manager at either your peer level or the upper level is going to want to know where you're at from a variance perspective. Typically, the people that are working for you understand either we're ahead of schedule or we're behind schedule. We're over cost or we're under cost or we're around where we need to be. And that's as much information as they're going to need. But upper management tracks the costs because those are all rolled up from a work package perspective into multiple work packages. And to see the health of the company and the projects that are being worked at by the project managers, we need to have variance analysis. Okay, that gives us visibility into what we refer to as that detailed view of the analytics, what we have available to us. So you're going to see a couple new terms that come in now. One of them is variance at complete, VAC. And its formula, VAC, is your BAC minus your EAC, your baseline at complete minus your estimate at complete. That's the formula for it. And you'll see that EAC is the estimate at complete also, and it has a variety of formulas. You'll see that you can have different ones depending on what you're looking for. Now, that doesn't mean that you're skewing the data. It just means that there are different ways to calculate it depending on what you're trying to observe. Okay? Let's go ahead and talk about those performance indexes. So you've got CPI, which is the cost performance index, and you've got SPI, which is the schedule performance index. And these are the typical types of numbers and formulas that you're going to be asked to provide. So what's your CPI and what's your SPI? And typically the cost performance index measures whether the project is on budget. If the measurement is precisely 1.0, then it is precisely on budget. If it's over 1.0, and remember this is the cost performance index, CPI, if it's over 1.0, the project is under budget. If the measurement is under 1.0, then the project is over budget. So any number above 1 or on 1 is seen as positive from a cost performance standpoint. Anytime you drop below 1, you are looking at something that is over budget. If you are substantially below 1.0, By substantially, I mean, you're 0.5 or 0.3 or something like that. You need to really take a peek at what's happening on the project, and it may require a re-baseline. Likewise, now let's talk about schedule performance. It has the same format. If your measurement is over 1.0, so if your SPI is over 1.0, you're ahead of schedule. If it's precisely 1.0, you're right on schedule. But if it's under 1.0, you're behind schedule. And the same thing would go here. If your SPI is dramatically below the 1.0 mark, that means that your schedule is probably not accurate. Something has happened. Either we didn't calculate something correctly or something has been formatted incorrectly. You need to go review and look at these calculations. Okay? They talk about things getting down to 0.9 as the threshold for really trying to require investigation. I've seen projects perform at the 0.9 level, and they're healthy projects, not a problem. But if you drop below 0.9, my recommendation would be you need to understand why. The project manager should understand why we have either cost performance issues and overruns or schedule. Why are we losing schedule? And typically, those are very easy to point to. Those are things that within the organization, they're easy to understand why we're either behind schedule or ahead of schedule, behind cost or ahead of cost. So remember that budget at completion, BAC, is the total budget allocated to the project. That was what we gave you in the beginning. The BAC was our budget. On your projects, you had a BAC. We basically told you we want you to do this amount of work with the proposal for this amount of money. Your BAC is generally plotted over time. For example, there will be multiple points. You can kind of break it down either by weekly or monthly to be able to see and forecast what that looks like. The BAC is also used to compute the EAC, the estimate at complete, which would be what is the total cost going to be for me. Now, there's a couple other formulas that are going to come in determined off of that BAC, and those are called TCPI, which is the 2 complete performance index, and the TSPI, the 2 complete schedule performance index. So TCPI and TSPI are additional formulas you may be asked to put together. Now, for your projects, what I anticipate you're going to be working on, I've got 6 easy steps to using Microsoft Project. And for those of you that have used Microsoft Project in the past, you know that what I just said is an oxymoron. Microsoft Project is a very complex tool. There are multiple steps that you can take to get to the same point in time, and it has a learning curve that is somewhat steep. The basics to it are very easy, but there are nuances associated with data entry that will drive you crazy. So don't worry about that for right now. What I want you to do is I want you to start working with the basics. There's 6 easy steps that I want you to use for being able to create earned value in your Microsoft Project plan. Now, these steps are going to be based upon either using Microsoft Project 2013 or 16. If you're using Microsoft Project 2010, these steps are going to be a little out of link, but you'll be able to find them with these type of instructions. If you're using the newest version of Microsoft Project, some of the things are a little bit skewed and moved into different areas. There are 2 recommendations I have for you once you start using Microsoft Project. Microsoft has great YouTube videos that walk you through every version. So if you're using 2010, 2013, 16, or a higher version, you can go in and type Microsoft Project, the version you're using, what is it you're trying to do? So if you're trying to come up with earned value, how do I determine earned value in Microsoft Project 2013? It'll give you a list of instructions. So let's just talk about it from a generic perspective, which is what this is. You're going to insert the resources with their hourly rates in the resource sheet view. So you need to resource load your project, and then you have hourly rates associated with that. That way you know what the cost of the labor is going to be. Okay? You assign the resources to the tasks in the Gantt entry view. So you assign them to all of those predetermined tasks that you have, and that way you know how much it will cost for each one of those tasks. A summation of the hours that you anticipated times the labor is going to give you what each one of those steps should cost. And then that's what you save as what we refer to the project baseline. That gives you the baseline. Then you're going to record the actual start and finish times. So you're going to see that you're going to start to erode some of that by recording actual start and actual finish times, because it may not have started exactly on time, and you may have certain things that come in that would have been either out of scope or out of budget that you may have to add. Now, don't forget also that you've got, we're just talking about labor at this point. You've got hard deliverables too. So many times there's hardware or pieces of parts that you have to use, and those cost money also. So those are things that get dropped in addition to just the labor. So you're going to record the actual start and finish times and add the actual work to each week within the project plan. That's step 4. And that's something that you're going to be moving through the project with on your projects. Then, step 5, you're going to review what we call the earned value analysis, the EVA metrics, using the earned value views and reports. So if you go up into, I'll call it the top of Microsoft Project, you'll be able to see that there are different areas where you can pull earned value. Okay? The view that I have below me is an earned value view. You can see that it actually shows Microsoft Project's view for EAC, ACWP, and BCWP, and it predicts those 3 on a trend line moving across time. So ultimately, when you're working on a long project being 30, 60, 90 days, a year, you need these data points to see where you're at, because you have different work packages that were supposed to be completed at different points in time. This gives you the ability to see where you're tracking cost-wise versus where you need to be. On the chart that you see in front of us, below my image, you can see that at a certain point in time, everything drops off. There's a steady ramp up, and then everything drops off. Those are areas where you need to be concerned. If something is dropping off, but the project is completed at that point, so if we're into project closing where the apex is, and then everything dials down to shut the project down, that's a good trend. But if you start to pick up these peaks where you come up and then drop down, and then come up again and then drop down, that means that you haven't smoothed the work out. That means that you're basically inefficient. You're not as effective as you can be. So this also gives you a window to see how effective you are in the performance of the work that's being done. So let's just talk about Microsoft Project, and remember, this is just a generic view. So things could be different in the version you're using, because you may be, as I said, using 2010, 2013, 2016, or a higher version than that. So what we want to do is you want to enter the resources. So I've got an example here where I've just thrown 4 different people at some work that's being done. So this is just to show you what that would look like. I had Joe Bob, I had Robert Oz, Sam Space, and Greg Wiz, and I added them into a construction project that I was putting together. And that construction project, you can see Sam Space is doing the planning, and I've got him down at $65 an hour. Joe Bob is done at a different cost, so there's a different cost associated with him. Okay, same thing with Greg Wiz. So you can see that you put in the hourly rates as we've described for you here. Okay, this figure above depicts all 4 of these team members who are assigned to the project with their hourly rates. I've loaded in their hourly rates. Now, once you've got that, you've got your pool of resources that you've established. You're going to go back to your Gantt chart, and you're going to assign them to the specific tasks that you need them to be working on. You could have somebody working on multiple tasks. So Greg, even though he's doing planning, will probably be doing everything we've identified for you in this project under the planning area, but somebody else may be helping him also. So maybe that finalizing drawings, he has to bring someone in to help him do that. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to fully identify all the resources that are going to be working in your project. That's step 2. In addition to that, then I want you to follow these, I'll call it simple tasks, but these are simple if these map to the version of Microsoft project you're doing. You're going to click on the Gantt chart view, either the task entry or view icon in the resource management toolbox. Select split the window, and by split the window I'm going to show you that in the next slide. But splitting the window gives you the ability to have the Gantt chart on the top side, and you'll have your resource loading information on the bottom side. So there's a table below, and you can grab and drag or click on and easily see what you want to add in. So let's take a peek at what that looks like. So in step 2 for MS Project, you can see I've got my Gantt chart up on top, so I can see the tasks as they're all moving across, and the task usage window at the bottom opens up, and it gives me information on the resources. I can see what resources are being used. You'll be able to see that I've got Joe, Bob, and Greg working on that first task in the task usage view. Okay? These are great ways to kind of see multiple views of what's happening as you're loading data. Now, step 3 is going to be to save the baseline. Follow these steps. Simple steps, you go to Tools, you hit Tracking, you do Save Baseline. You're going to be prompted to give a name to the baseline because you may create multiple baselines as you're moving along. You may want to have different names for them, and then when you're done, you click OK. Now, if you're using Microsoft Project 2.13, you go into the Project tab, and then you go to Set Baseline, and you'll see that you can set a baseline or erase a baseline. So that's the difference between these two. Simple steps. In addition to Microsoft, there are a ton of different YouTube videos out there that have been created by users of Microsoft Project that'll walk you through how to create baselines, how to track costs, how to do any of these based on the type of software that you're running. So then what you're going to do, Microsoft Project Step 4 is going to be, you're going to actually record the actual project recording of the actual costs and calculate earned value on the project. So this is where you now take and start to actually calculate what we refer to as the AC, the actual costs, and you're determining the earned value on the project. Okay? Step 5 is going to be where we take project, use the earned value and earned value schedule and cost indicators and tables to display that information. So now that we've calculated that information, what I want you to do is either create reports or tables where you can do snapshots to display what that looks like. And these are called EVA reports or EVA views. You can go up into view in certain some of them it's called reports, some of them it's called views. You can get this information in multiple ways, but to create the earned value table, you select the window pane you would like to use to display the earned value information. Which of the window panes do you want to use? Select view, select table, select more tables because it'll pull up the side and it'll say more tables. This is hidden inside the more tables. You go into more tables and you're going to see all of the earned value table information that you need. So you can pick the one you want, you click OK, and that gives you the opportunity to pull that up. So here's what that would look like. Here is a schedule that we've actually plotted out the earned value. So when you go into that view, within this schedule, you can see that I've got my plan view in the first column. The highlighted column or the orange column next to it is the earned value, the BCWP. The first one was work planned, BCWS, that was the planned value. Earned value is the BCWP. The actual cost is the column after that. And then you can see that you've got schedule variance, cost variance, EAC, BAC, and VAC. All of those are elements I'm going to ask you to give us information on as you're working on your projects. So this formula here is something that you will need to create. You ultimately are going to need a Microsoft project schedule that is resource loaded, that is linked, and it has earned value capability. By that I mean you've established a baseline and you can plot where you're at this point in time. Because we're going to force you to, at a certain point, take your Microsoft project and we're going to force you to do a completion to 100% and then do that mapping to it. So once again, here are the field names for earned value reports. The ACWP, AC, BAC, all of these we have talked about, but here's what their meaning is in case you forget that. Okay? For those of you that hate acronyms, when you start dealing with earned value, all of this is going to just seem like it's one thing after another after another. Don't worry about it. The two important ones that I really want you to focus on, SPI and CPI. These indexes really tell you where your cost is at this point in time, schedule is at this point in time. You can understand where you were supposed to be, but these indices use the following equations. So SPI is equal to earned value divided by planned value. CPI is earned value divided by actual costs. Okay? So make sure you want to cover all of that type of information as we continue to move forward. Now, earned value is one of the best things you can do as a project manager. I know that there are many times that you'll say this is a lot of work and I have to go manage my project. I have to go lead my team. There are things that need to be done and this seems like a waste of time. It is not, because you will be asked on a regular basis by upper management or other tiers of management, where is your project at this point in time? And typically that happens many times on a weekly basis, sometimes on a monthly basis. As a minimum, it would be on a quarterly basis, and you need to be able to tell them exactly where you are. So this was our week 5 video lecture for you. It's on monitoring and controlling projects. So congratulations. We're coming down the home stretch. You've really got a great understanding of projects and how we understand how to control them. Looking at the variance reports and making those course corrections when necessary. If you have a variance, once again, that is beyond what it should be, you should know what's causing it. If you're overrunning, you should know why. If you're underperforming in schedule, you should know why. You should be able to explain those things. Okay? Have a great week. Goodbye.